Now I'm very excited to welcome back a fight enthusiast and one hell of an MMA handicapper in Lou Finocchiaro from gamblou.com and the Bout Business podcast. You can follow Lou on Twitter at gamblou. Lou, thanks for coming back on the show. We're at a new year. Everybody's already got their resolutions going. Some have probably dropped out. My resolution is to win more money in MMA. How you doing?
That's always a great resolution. I think mine is in the same lane, just become a little bit more focused. Maybe try and squeeze. Last year was about a half a unit profit per card, some 44 cards. Doesn't sound like much, but when you figure it at the end of the year, 24 units is not so bad. I'd like to squeeze that up and maybe massage that to a unit per card. And we'll see how we can get that done. But it is all about focus. And we're in our second UFC card of the year, as you're aware. Last week, 8-2-1 for the favorites. So the favorites are starting out firm, but it doesn't deter me being a dog fan, trying to derive maybe some value out of underdogs this week.
Oh, there you go. And I'm a dog fan as well. But, man, don't sell yourself short. 22 units is great. Profitability is great. If it's one unit, you're ahead of the game. It's just the way it is in this industry. So that's a wonderful year. I always listen to your show, and you've had some fantastic angles. And I was real excited for your year. Helping me out, too, prep for some of these cards is always a great thing. But, hey, we have an event, UFC 297 pay-per-view coming up this weekend in Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, Canada. And I guess the first question I have is, what's significant about either the arena that they're in or both fighting in Toronto, Canada to this card?
Well, I'm glad you start with that, Kiev, because there are a few things have to be mentioned. Number one, Toronto. And people wouldn't necessarily understand this maybe unless they're hockey fans. And they're used to seeing guys skate around on ice with 2 teeth in the front and 5 missing. But the fight fans in Canada are voracious. There are no more feverish fight fans anywhere in the world than Canada. They match the fervor of those in Brazil. So that's number one. Number two, the fact that it's Toronto and a pay-per-view mean we're in a 30-foot cage, not a 25-foot cage like the Apex. So the grappling heavy fighter may find a little more stress, or he may find it more difficult to corner, grab onto, and drag down to the floor their opponent simply because of all the extra real estate. And there are a couple of fights featuring, what looks to be wrestler versus striker. The next thing we have to understand is, out of the 12 fights, 9 of them feature Canadian fighters. 8 of the 9 are favored. Do all 8 deserve to be favored? If I look at it, I think maybe so. But can we poke holes, and is there maybe 1 or 2 opportunities within that realm of Canadian strength that we can try and expose? I think maybe there is, but let's understand, as the UFC sets its table, it wants to feature fighters from that area to help grow its brand. And yet, sometimes we can find these fighters are set up with somewhat favorable matchups. I'm not saying it's set for the Canadians to sweep, but if a guy blindly put $10 on every Canadian on Saturday night, I think you possibly win some money, despite the fact that some are favorites, that most are favorites.
Yeah, and that's a key part of it. Like you said, Canadian fighters. My next question was, are there a lot of Canadian fighters here? I think I counted 8 of them, Lou, and that's a decent amount for any event.
Yeah, 9 Canadian fighters, and the fans are going to be raucous from the first fight with Malcolm Gordon, and then they'll have to sit on their hands because it's the co-main and main event that does not feature any Canadians.
Well, there you go. So the co-main and main event are just straight up different countries, not from there. But you know what? They'll have their fill of their own guys. I think it's just, going to be fun to watch this big title contention right here in the middleweight here, especially between two very accomplished fighters in Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis. So I'm very excited for that. And yeah, people could say the women's Bantam title fight is interesting too. Now, obviously Nunez is gone and things change, my man. And obviously belts have to pass, but that's going to be a very interesting fight as well to me. But before we get to the main card, I always like to ask you about the undercard. Are there any fights that stick out to you that you want to discuss or possibly even have a plan?
Well, it's actually the undercard where I'm going to be fishing a little bit more for those live underdogs. The main card we'll get to, but I find less underdog fodder there. But to start with, and I'll go quick, in the second fight in, Canadian Jazz Dovicius is fighting a Brazilian Bethe Cachoeira. Excuse that pronunciation. Jazz and Cachoeira. So what we have in Jasmine is a mean fighter that really is very well-rounded. She's coming in on a stepping stone of wins, and she's a grimy, gritty, grappling fighter, very aggressive. She's going to go right at Cachoeira. Cachoeira, on the other side, is fully aware of her, and it's Priscilla Cachoeira, excuse me. Cachoeira is completely aware that she's set up here as the sugar daddy that's going to show up and apparently supposed to lay down for Jazz Dovicius. This thing opened 335 Jasmine, and now she's up to 380. The Brazilian Cachoeira now plus 330 or so. Usually these fights will go the distance, women's fights. Very few end in finish. And so while I think Jasmine is the correct side here, I wouldn't put past a couple of things. Number one, the total in the fight opened 1.5 and over -155. I really believe that if Jazz wins, it's decision. I don't know that she is strong enough to get Cachoeira out of there, and Cachoeira's got power. She's going to come in and try and knock the block off Jazz. I'm not against a little money on Cachoeira here as a live dog. The next fight is Johan Linnes and Sam Patterson. Now, Linnes, Canadian, and he's fighting in Canada, taking on Sam Patterson, who's a long, tall drink of water. If you look at the specifics here, Patterson 6'3" for 170-pound fighter, 27 years old, and is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage besides 2-inch height advantage. Patterson lost his last fight against a young power slugger named Ashmuz. He was knocked out in his hometown. Now he has to pay the price for that and travel to Canada to face Linnes, who has had some gas problems before, but I believe those will be very well taken care of, understanding he's fighting in front of his home crowd. Linnes now priced around that -150. We used him on the podcast as a second leg of a parlay, so we hold Linnes in a positive money situation coming into this fight, but I'd be remiss not to mention him because I think he has every bit the power that Mr. Ashmuz does. And I think Patterson, being as long and tall as he is, compromises himself to make this weight class. And he may not do so anymore after this fight with Linnes. I look for the hometown Linnes to be in good position there. Next, we'll go 2 fights away from that. And this is a very interesting one, Kiev, because we've got a basic rematch of a fight that these guys fought within a year, and it's the hometown Side, and he's fighting a guy named Ramon Tavares. Now, Side is all the hype in Canada, and he earned his UFC ticket by knocking out Ramon Tavares in a contender fight some months ago. I remember watching the fight at the time, and I remember Dana White's comments at that time, and that was that the ref that stepped in and called that a KO or a TKO did the worst job he's ever experienced in his career, and I agreed. The fight should not have been stopped. It was stopped early, but make no mistake about it, Mr. Side was clearly winning the fight when it was stopped. Flash forward to so the result of that was Dana gave Mr. Tavares another chance. And what he do? He went out and completely KO'd his next opponent in a contender fight as an underdog. And now the UFC wants to make sure this is a fair situation, and they're putting these two guys right back in the cage together. I think this is a really tough spot for the Canadian here today. He already supposedly beat him. Now he has to go back, take him again, and he has not fought, yet Ramon has fought and coming off a very impressive KO. As an underdog, here's a fight, opened today, minus 180. Now it's only minus 185. Not a lot of movement here. I like Ramon Tavares a little bit in this situation.
Wow. And you know, what's funny. I was keying in on this fight as well, but maybe from a different perspective. I was going to look under 1.5 rounds, Lou. Looking at some of these fighters' histories, you know, especially when it comes to Side, most of his stuff has been finished in the first. So I can't even gauge how much of a gas tank he has. I know he went 5 rounds back in Battlefield Fight League, but that was, 4 fights ago or so. He likes to get out early, and these guys are punchers. I think this could be a very violent fight. And now that you added that story to it, there's a storyline now. I think maybe that puts a little bit more towards the first round as far as effort from a guy like Ramon Tavares. So that almost makes me like it a little bit more. It's pretty much at even money right now for the total over or under 1.5 rounds.
Yeah, and it opened minus 175 to the over. So that's getting steam, that under.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I grabbed it earlier.
You and me both. I made this note on Tuesday, or on Monday, I should say, when I do my opening line look, and I had seen that it opened 75, was 130, now is down. So I don't know that I'm quite so enamored on the total. I would surely be more enamored on fight does not go the distance, because you're right. I think somebody's going to come out of here getting finished.
Yeah, fight doesn't go the distance. You're laying some good wood on that, probably minus 250 or something is what I think I saw. I'd have to relook at that. But the always thing that worries me is when you get into the bantam weights in the featherweights and everything, those guys in general will last longer. So that is, and that's a general statement.
Especially, yes, it's general, and especially now you're putting them in all that real estate. It's like 2 flies in a barrel trying to compete. So I totally get your drift there. I'm trying to look for to fight to start round 2. No, you get plus 140 if you like your first round. Fight to start round 3. The no is minus 190. So they're not doing you any favors. They're aware of what we're speaking of.
They certainly are aware of it. But I'm going to still key in on it for just the history. I'm not sure it would be a large play if I get to the board on that one anyway. But no, good stuff and great advice on that for sure. So and you have Canadian fighter in almost every single fight. In the prelims, Side and Tavares is really the only one without a Canadian flag next to him. Jourdain is an interesting one. I put next to Jourdain. I actually put Sean Woodson with a question mark. I think I liked Woodson a little bit more with the plus money. Not saying I'm going to get to the window, but I thought that Sean Woodson was getting a little underpriced just because of him not being Canadian. Maybe you can have any quick thoughts on that.
This is Woodson's first fight outside the United States, and what I'll be watching for him with that frame, 6'2", 79-inch reach, is his cut. He had a great win against Bazooka his last out. He opened plus 140. Now he's plus 180. Everything there is speaking to me like a live dog. Now with Jourdain, we have a Canadian fighter that now that John Makdessi has retired, he's the most tenured Canadian fighter. He's never been able to fight in Canada. He's really looking forward to it. I think we're going to get his best effort. You might have just diagnosed what might be one of the best fights of the night. I don't know that I have a strong opinion either way, but if Woodson is maybe one of the first, in the first 20 minutes, he steps on the scale, looks good, and he gets to go back and drink orange juice and eat bananas, I might have him targeted as a live dog.
Yeah. I've seen him fight before, and even though he's got that tall frame, he seems to move himself well with it. He's got that draw, but 3 wins in a row, minus the draw against Luis Saldana. So I'm going to definitely look at a little bit deeper. If there's a Canadian I was going to fade, it was going to be Jourdain on this situation. So we'll take another dive into this one. But let's get to the main card then. And we have a wonderful fight with actually 2 non-Canadians, Arnold Allen, I believe from the UK. I think I'll have to double check that, against Movsar Evloev. So what are your thoughts on this one starting out the main card?
Yeah, Russia versus England, and should be a really awesome fight. And here's the one maybe referenced where excuse the pronunciation, with a guy with my last name, shouldn't mispronounce other guys' last names, but Russian Evloev, the guy makes no qualms about being a wrestling-based fighter, and that's, to me, I love that. Now, everybody wants to put on a show and win bonuses by using their hands and flashy knockouts and everything. He just wants to win. He wants error-free fights, and I respect him for that. Now, that being said, he really needs a win here, and if he can get a win against Allen, who's a pedigreed top-ranked fighter, he really skyrockets up the rankings. As far as Allen, he'll be an inch taller. He's a lefty, and while he doesn't have a reach advantage, he will be, I believe, the fighter that has more pedigreed, big-time 5-round fights, meaning he just got beat by Max Holloway in a 5-round fight. He's been through this before. Now, with this being only 3 rounds, he's going to allow it to go. Now, the Russian Evloev doesn't believe that Allen's takedown defense can even come close to stopping him. And you know how those Russian wrestlers are. They're unrelenting, like a steamroller. They'll just roll you over. Now, Allen has, and I watched the interviews, he's been training with 170-pound guys, one after another, all trying to take him down. So he knows exactly what's coming. And in this fight, as long as it remains on the feet, Allen will be the sharper, faster, crisper, more refined striker by far, as well defensively. So Evloev, though this fight starts on the feet, doesn't want to spend too much time with Allen on the feet. This fight I see opening at 155 for the Russian. He was a minus 155. On Monday, it was minus 185. And just before we came on here today, and I'm looking at DraftKings primarily, he's minus 190. That segment of opening between 100 and 190 and then growing is really a tenderloin segment for looking at dogs. And Allen fits that. and I'll have to do a little more research, but I do like Allen in this fight. In fact, if I play it, it's Allen or pass.
Evloev, one of the first things you look at is, I mean, his last, 7, 8 fights went to decision. And the one that didn't was deep into the 5th round anyway against Rafael Diaz back in 2018. This guy hasn't had a finish since July 21st of 2018. So the natural thing that people do is look to see what his price is winning by decision. It's like 10 cents cheaper.
Right.
It is not anything that you want to look at for any situation. I laughed at that price, Lou, when I saw that, but the books kind of know where people tend to go to.
They know what we're up to, Kiev, doggone it, and that's a pain. But what I will say is, in Evloev's last fight, he fought a guy named Diego Lopez, and it was a tough spot because Lopez took the fight on very short notice and jumped in there, and he gave Evloev all he could handle. Allen saw that, and I think Allen's greatly encouraged by that last fight. This is another fight, should be a banger.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you too. Let's move on to the next one then. Chris Curtis against Marc-Andre Barriault. And I have to get the updated. I don't think 165 is correct. 154 plus 154 on Marc-Andre Barriault's side. Chris Curtis's is minus 185. So, I mean, Chris Curtis has been one of those guys that I haven't been able to figure out well, Lou. I'm pretty sure I've lost on a few of his last fights. When I was high on him, I kick myself when he fights a long, tall fighter, and then they just move backwards and stick him. And I believe that's happened a few different times to Curtis. Yet Curtis has beaten some fighters that really surprised me before that. So I've been kind of the yin and yang on it, on the wrong side of buying on him. And maybe I don't want to call it bitterness here, but it immediately made me look towards Marc-Andre Barriault here, especially because, he's the price at the dog. And you can't deny that he's gotten better. I know he lost to Fluffy. I think it's okay losing to Fluffy Hernandez because Fluffy Hernandez is fantastic, and he's going to be in the next main card, main UFC event coming up too, and I can't wait to talk about that. But beating Julian Marquez and Eric Anders, I think really said something about Barriault. So I'm looking towards him, but I want to see what your thoughts on this fight are before I make any final decisions.
Yeah. And I'm kind of the same, or have been the same with Curtis. I've always been I've always degraded him to a touch because he used to fight at 170. Now he's fighting up at 85. And I would check him a little on that, but he's done very, very well. And in this fight, he's got 41 fights under his belt. He's going to be much more skilled, quicker, faster, explosive fighter. Barriault's a little bit of a plotter, and it's the body of work, the level of competition that Curtis has faced, I think far exceeds the level of competition that Barriault has faced. I think Curtis is a rightful favorite in this fight, and I would put a very, very strong lean on Chris Curtis here. He opened minus 165. I'm seeing it now minus 180, 2.5 shaded to the over minus 115. I think it's going to be the durability and aggression of Barriault against the speed, precision, and explosion of Chris Curtis. And I think I'm going to lean Chris Curtis here.
It was Jack Hermanson who I was talking about too. That's the fighter that got me against Curtis, and he just fought a magnificent technical fight using his size, his length, and backing up and not letting Curtis inside to connect any of those hooks. So that's but at the same time, you're right. I think Barriault is a little bit of a plotter, which is a little bit worrisome. And if Barriault wants to get in any takedowns or anything like that, Chris Curtis has been fantastic against takedowns, 92% takedown defense. that's just been a very good asset that he's had. He's wrestled before in the past, even though I look at him as mostly a striker, right? A stand-up fighter. And I just don't think that Barriel's even going to bother. And that's what could get him in trouble. I wonder if a KO prop could be in order for this one, Lou.
I surely wouldn't discourage you from doing it. I mean, you look at he KO'd Joaquin Buckley, who's a horse, and that fight against Hermanson, he'd be the first to tell you that that was an off night, a poor fight, and I want to even say that might have been overseas. And then the loss to Gastelum in a decision, that's a questionable loss. So I think it's not too much travel for Chris Curtis. He's a bubbly, vivacious guy, trains out of Las Vegas, and I'm going to put a strong lean on him.
All right, sounds good. Chris Curtis, you're laying a bit of juice, but maybe a KO prop or something like that could be in order, or you can find a dance partner for him. There's plenty of them on this card. Just first look for the Canadian flag. And then maybe you can find like a Julian Robertson or somebody that might fit the bill. Let's move on to the next fight. Neil Magny versus Mike Malott. And I'm looking at this price and I'm thinking to myself, Mike Malott, do you deserve to be minus 400 against the guy that's been in as many fights as Neil has? Lou, you have the table.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that line of thinking, but most people just look and see, hey, Malott 5-0 his last fight, Neil Magny 2-3 his last 5. So, this is easy. Well, no, it isn't quite as easy as that. You got tremendous experience advantage in Magny. You've got a 2-inch height advantage. Now he is 36 and Malott 32, and he has a 7-inch reach advantage, does Mr. Magny. So Magny's got some physical advantages. He's been in he's fought the who's who. He's been in with more experienced, dangerous opponents. And with all that being said, you got the hometown Canadian guy with all the pressure. Everybody wants tickets and everything else. So I see there being a little pressure on Mike Malott. It's a huge step up for Mr. Malott. And the only thing stopping me from really pinning the tail on Mr. Magny is the fact that Magny's had 55% of his losses have come via sub, and for Malott, 60% of his wins have come via the submission. So maybe late in this fight is when Malott may have a chance at something like that. But my angle for this fight, after peeling the onion back a little bit, is I saw that the 2.5 open minus 115, 2.5 over now is minus 210 or so. Fight to start round 3 plus 120. Now, to me, that's almost a bet for Neil Magny. Can Magny make it to the start of round 3? With his experience, his size, I believe he does. I don't think Malott is going to put him away that easily. And so for this fight, Magny Malott, this is available at DraftKings now. Fight starts round 3 plus 120. Sign me up.
I like that idea on it. Fight starts round 3, and I always write these down. I wrote down 2 different options, and sometimes I'll take a fight 2 ways if I'm getting decent plus money. I would just take possibly Neil Magny straight up for plus 280, and then Mike Malott by sub. Mike Malott has 6 submissions out of his 10 wins, so he's doing it simple math 60% of the time. Neil Magny, that's been his crutch a little bit, is getting subbed. But, Magny has not been KO'd in quite some time. And I'm looking back, it's all the way back to 2018 against Santiago Ponzinibbio. I always struggle with his name. But that was a long time ago, 6 years practically, when he's been KO'd. I think the much more obvious way could be Mike Malott in the sub situation, and you're probably going to get in the plus 100 120 range plus 150. I'll have to take a look at it. You put a little bit more on that, a little bit less on that. You're playing a fight two ways that you can earn money on. So I'm going to consider that one as well, Lou.
Yeah, I'll look here. Mallet via sub plus 110. I will not follow you on that one, and I'll tell you why, Kiev, because if I make the same play you just suggested, which makes a lot of sense, they'll find a way for me to lose both bets. I'm not going to stink it up for you. I'm going to let you have that one. That's not a tactic that I often use, but it's a tactic that I've seen others use successfully.
Not if it happens in round 3, Lou. Not if it happens in round 3, my friend. That's what you're hoping for.
That's right. Exactly.
Well, maybe we'll cheer for all our bets and they have it happen in 1-3. We just won't be on anything the same, but that would be kind of fun to do. I will say that Magny has certainly lasted against a lot of fighters. The only one he didn't get into the round, well, I guess Shavkat Rachmanov, he brought him all the way to 2 seconds left in the second round. But Gilbert Burns was the only one fighter over the last 10, 15 fights that didn't get into round 3. So you have me strongly considering your side as well. I have not have one play yet, but I kind of like all 3 of those ideas, just not all done at the same bet. Let's get into the co-main event here. We are at Raquel Pennington here for the women's bantamweight title against Mayra Bueno Silva. I like Bueno Silva, and I've done well with her over some of her past fights. In saying that, Raquel Pennington's on a nice little 5-0 run herself here, beating Caitlin Vieira, Aspen Ladd, Macy Chias, and Pani Kianzad. Just some pretty substantial fighters. No tomato cans there. You know, her loss was back in 2020 to Holly Holm that she just got outstruck in. No shame in losing to Holly back then. You know, Holly's probably done now, but back in 2020, she was still a very dangerous lady. But at the same time, Bueno Silva, she's strong, Brazilian. She knows some of her jiu-jitsu. She's really good in the clinch. I like how she gets fighters in the clinch and uses her knees and lifts her knees. She has a no contest overturned against Holly Holm from 2023, but she had a nice 3-win streak before that. Of course, losing to Manon Fiorot before, who is the real, I think probably the real contender in this class. But let's look at these two ladies. They'll have to fight Fiorot after this, most likely. But I'm going to, even though Mara Bueno Silva is favored, I like her to win, but I actually kind of like her maybe in the prop market by submission.
Yeah, and so this is the fight that I'd like to give you my best bet on, and it's going to be Raquel Pennington. Listen, Mayra Bueno Silva is mean as a junkyard dog. She really is. But I think we got to understand who she is and what she is, and I'm seeing the win over Holly Holm is legit. Again, Holm back in August of 23 isn't the Holm that Rocky beat some years ago. So I give Rocky credit for that. But before, and Bueno Silva had Adderall in her system for ADD.
Is that why it was overturned?
Yes, and I don't see that as a real issue. So I don't I award her that home fight. But before that, Lena Landsberg, Stephanie Egger, Yanan Wu, come on. This is a huge step up for Mayra Bueno Silva. She's getting, I believe, a ton of recency off of that Holly Holm fight, in my humble opinion. And now you look at who Pennington's been in there with. She beat a killer in Vieira, Aspen Ladd, who's no longer with the organization, Macy Chiasson, Kianzad, and Renault. You have to go back to 21 and 20 before you really find stepping stone or fighters that maybe are not of her ilk or caliber. Pennington trains at elevation. She's a no-nonsense gal. She's got wrestling chops. And as far as I'm concerned, looking at the total 4.5 overs minus 170, Pennington, her wrestling, I believe, is the kryptonite to the 70% submission rate of Mayra Buena Silva. If Pennington can weather 10 minutes, now anyone listening to me and on Pennington going to have a harrowing 10 minutes in this fight. But when this fight gets to round 3, and if it can get to round 3, this fight's going to turn. And I feel very, very good using a best bet on Rocky Pennington here. Yes, she's 35, but that also with 35 goes the experience, the level of competition faced. And so I think this is the one that I'll hang my hat on.
Well, there you go. You got
read on more of these, but we're getting
experienced fighter.
We're getting better podcast run by disagreement.
No, that's good, and that's I think our first real one. I'm not. I do my card. I go through it. I do a handicap in every one that's not full. I write down my leans, and then I talk to Lou. That's what I do, and then I make my decisions just based upon diving back into it. So that's what I wrote was Silva by sub. But you make some great points because Pennington, I even remember watching her against Nunez back in 2018. She took her to the 5th round, and this was Nunez, prime Nunez, right? And I thought, man, this chick is freaking tough. And I don't know what happened, how she dropped the fight afterwards, but since then she's been an absolute beast. And you're right, she's hungry. I think she's still hungry. She's like, I can get this title. This is going to be a wonderful fight. And if you look at it your way, you go towards the dog, and that's Raquel Pennington. So I have no disagreement there. Maybe a good live betting situation. This thing gets past the 2nd round. Raquel, I think, is going to have the better gas tank, maybe, Lou.
And if it goes as predicted, she'll be a bigger underdog than the $140 or so she is now. She opened 145 and dipped as low as 130, 135, and now I'm seeing 140 or so. They clearly see a tough fight. I just think that Buena Silva's getting too much recency added on to her price. I think I don't want to say the wrong fighter is favored because that never works for a guy, but I sure do like Pennington in this spot.
All right, good stuff. Well, let's move on to the main event. Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis is fighting for the championship of the middleweight division, 185 pounds. And these two fighters certainly made it interesting a couple events ago, going at it in the stands, did they not, Lou?
How great was it that Strickland, like a gentleman, turned around and said, hey, Gil, would you take your son and move him over here? Hey, little boy, move over here just a little bit. And Gil took his boy and moved him over. And then Sean got up on the chair and went at him. I mean,
such a nice guy.
Strickland is a nut. He's a wacky guy. I like him. I really like him. I think he's truthful to the extent that it hurts him, and he's got no filter whatsoever on him. But let's talk about the fight. And here's how I see this fight. Dricus is a beast. I mean, he just got his jacket for hitting a plateau of, I think, 200 clean tests without testing for anything. So the guy's clean. But you look at his physique, he's chiseled, he's huge for the division, and he has massive power. And, they've set him in front of this guy that he's won this, and all the way up, they were discounting him, me included. He gets to Whitaker, and I thought Whitaker would really have his way with him. And he finished Whitaker in the 2nd round. Now, in the interviews yesterday, Sean Strickland believes that Whitaker, as well as Brunson, the fighter he beat 1 or 2 fights earlier, are dead horses, meaning there was no life left in him. That could be true. As far as how this fight goes, it's going to be two guys that go clashing head to head. That's what they want to do. We remember Strickland with Alex Pereira. He wanted to test his mettle against a striker, and he got KO'd in the first round. So I know what I'm getting in Dricus. I'm getting a forward charging, athletic guy with tons of power that can gas. And that's important in this fight. In Strickland, I got a guy that can fight for 3 days. That's all he does is fight. Gas is no problem. He never wrestles. He doesn't grapple, but he can. And he has tremendous advantages in each in this fight. The wild card with Strickland is his IQ. Now, his coach, Eric Nixick, out of Extreme Couture in Las Vegas, it's his job to keep Strickland channeled, focused on the fight and not get too emotional. But can I trust that? So I've gone a long way into telling everybody how I see this fight, and I still don't have any clue how to bet it or what to bet, because I don't know if Dricus can say something to Strickland that'll throw him off guard and get him emotional. I think that if Strickland was Cannonier, or if he was any of the other fighters in the division that I didn't have the IQ worries with, that this would be an easy one for me, because I think Strickland takes him into the third and fourth round and batters him. Dricus has said that his cardio issues were because of a septum issue in his nose. There's something in your nose called a septum, I think. He's had it corrected. He can breathe way better. Well, the first thing I'm doing if I'm Strickland is jabbing the bejeebies out of that nose, kneeing it, elbowing it, and making it hard for Dricus to breathe. So fascinating fight. I want to like Strickland. I'd like to bet him here. I think the price is advantageous on Strickland, but I can't trust what kind of emotional person I'm going to get when the bell for round one rings.
I agree. I don't know why I think this, if I was lining this fight, it'd be even on each side though. And you have Plessis as the dog. And so that moves me towards him a little bit. Now, I know he's not a pure wrestler, but he has grappling wins. He has takedowns. He has submissions on his record, and so that makes me, and I know Strickland's fought in a lot of these guys, but his grappling hasn't been purely tested, I don't think. If you look at some of his matches, I know the Pereira one was strange to me. I'm like, how quickly he got KO'd in that. And Pereira obviously moved up to the 200. But I was on Strickland against Adesanya, and I saw something in that, and I was happy to win. Now, Izzy's bitter as hell. Would you like some? He was saying some interesting things, saying Dricus is going to win inside the distance. These fighters mouth off. Not a lot of people. If you either like Strickland or you hate him, right? Isn't that kind of the way it is? You either like the guy or hate him. Well, Izzy's definitely on the hate side of that. But I kind of like his honesty and his. He does get a little bit mouthy, but I think the two things that you just nailed right there is the emotional side. I think that he needs to keep that straight, and I think it's going to get him caught up and possibly to the mat, and that's where Dricus can, stay on top and win this fight possibly. No,
I want to respectfully disagree. If this goes to the floor, and Dricus does not want this on the floor unless it's the first round, and he charges out like Brock Lesnar and tackles Strickland to get on top when he's fresh and dry. I look at Strickland as the more well-rounded fighter by far. Dricus doesn't want this on the floor. He wants to hit him with his hands. That's where he wants Sean. And I just think Sean. Look at his fight against Cannonier.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of Whitaker, Dricus has not fought anyone with that kind of explosion, power, and movement. And Strickland arguably beat Cannonier. He got the loss via split decision, but that could have gone either way.
I remember that fight.
I'm gonna do everything I can do to try and ascertain if Strickland can show me some mental focus for this fight. But again, gun to my head, if you're going to make me bet it, I'm taking Strickland on this one.
Okay, even with the juice. So I'm going to lean Dricus. You say Dricus. I might be wrong on that. I've called him Dricus forever. But I'm looking at a prop. Do you think this thing gets to round 4? Because these two guys aren't going to go out easily. And fight to start round 4 is plus 110, Lou. Maybe we don't even need to take a side in this. Maybe we can just, root for a longer fight as long as some emotions are put in check. I think that Strickland has the gas tank, like you said, and Dricus, if it's really that nose issue, maybe if that's cleaned up, this does get into round 4. And if they're not wrestling on the mat, they're going to have more gas, Lou.
This fight opened, and I'm tracking opening numbers like from November, Thanksgiving-ish. 3.5 under 115. Monday, it was 1.5 over 225. And the 115 was under 3.5, okay? Monday, it was 1.5 over 225. I'm looking at it today. It's 2.5 minus 110. They don't know. Okay?
Don't know.
And so this is one where you can tell they don't. It's all over the place. Now, the guy that went under 3.5 and has over 1.5 might have done really well. I wish that was me. It isn't. But I was surprised. I thought 3.5 might be the right number. The 1.5 stunned me because it lends me to believe that it was Duplessis. I don't see Duplessis finishing Strickland early. Rather, I think this is an over fight, and if Strickland wins, I think it's because he absolutely picks him apart in the later rounds. Dricus in round 1, Dricus in round 2, round 3, 4, and 5, Strickland with the cardio. I think that's how I see the logical way that this fight progresses. That may be in a minority opinion, but that's how I'm handicapping this fight.
Okay. I think it was a bad price put out there by the books based upon the emotion of what happened in the stands. So that gets people thinking, oh, this thing's going to just be a quick rumble. But when these are professionals, once they get into that ring, they're going to size each other up a little bit. This is for the championship. They are not going to play on stupid emotions that kids have when fighting in the backyard or meeting at the park. I think they're going to be a little bit more careful. So I'm going to lean that this thing does start round 4 at the plus 110 before I do a little bit more research to fire down. But man, great stuff, Lou. What an amazing card that we just went over. I like it more and more. I mean, just from the first look, it doesn't look as exciting, but now after the New Year's, after Christmas, we're getting back into the MMA again. I got real excited talking about this with you, but there's also a few other cards coming up, Lou. And I'm wondering if you have any future plays either tied into a parlay or a play you already made or are looking to play that's not even happening this weekend. Yeah,
of course. And I just will say one more thing about Canada. People, if you're new to fights or if you watch a lot of fights, tune in. This thing is going to be just crazy. And the fans in Canada will not disappoint. Yes, there's a championship fight, and it's coming up, I want to say February 17th. Volkanovski against Ilya Tupuria. Volkanovski opened, I think 170, and Tupuria, or 175, 180, Tupuria 155, and I grabbed it, and I wasn't adroit enough to release it to Bout Business podcast people then. By the time I got it released to my people. Topuria was plus 130. He's now plus 120 or plus 125. I'm going to take the challenger against Volkanovski. I've made wheelbarrows of money off Alex Volkanovski, but there's a couple of things that draw my attention to the challenger. One is Volkanovski bouncing right back off of the KO to Makhachev. Makhachev's even come out and said he needs to slow it down, take some time. Other fighters have made this mistake. Fighters fight. They never study their history. I think never in any time in his career has Volkanovski been more susceptible. And for that reason, Topuria at plus 125 or better would be something that I would ask your listeners to consider.
I must have made that bet when you did, Lou, because it went down pretty much the next day or later that day when I took Ilya Topuria at DraftKings at plus 154, 6, one of those numbers. And then I checked it and it went down to 130s, and now it's down into the 120s. I can't disagree. I can't agree with you more is what I'm trying to say. Ilya Topuria is in a great spot. Volkanovski's in a questionable spot, calling off that loss, a little bit compromised, but I've always wanted to back Ilya in this situation. I even tried to get cute when he fought 2 fights ago or so. The wrestler is mine. I'm leaving. No. Mitchell. Oh yeah, yes, Bryce Mitchell. Yes, Thug Nasty, Bryce Mitchell. I even tried to get cute because I thought Thug was just way too big of a price, and no, this was nothing. Ilya out wrestled him, and not even just outbeat him. He's just a world class fighter, and it is his time. The interesting thing about Ilya, he's actually from part of the either Russia or Ukraine. He's from out east out there, but he also wore a Spanish flag for a while. Now he's back wearing a Georgia flag. So I'm a little bit confused by all that, but I love him in this spot.
Yeah, he was born in Germany, and he's of some other heritage, Russian or some Slavic, and he now is fighting out of Spain. So he's a hard guy to keep track of, and he's a little bit cocky for my liking. But with wins over Bryce Mitchell, Jai Herbert, Ryan Hall, people are going to look at that and say, this guy doesn't even belong in the cage with Volkanovski. But I really look at this situationally. If Volkanovski took this fight and it wasn't February, or let's say this fight gets postponed and now they're going to fight in July or August, I'm taking it. It comes down and things change. But as long as they keep this thing where it is, it's a situational handicap for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost thought that this weight class under Volk, I guess, was a little bit weaker. Now, you mentioned some of those names, Jai Herbert. Yeah, I'm not big into Damon Jackson, some of those guys. And I actually think that Volk's toughest opponent that he fought 3 different times in Max Holloway was probably the next best fighter in this division. That's what I thought. That's what I thought for a while. Actually, I thought Max might have gotten the best of him in that split decision back in 2020, but they gave it to Volk anyway. That was his only time. But yeah, Yara Rodriguez, he's there too. Korean Zombie, but I just think that these 2 fighters are above and beyond everybody else, and which makes it such a great fight. But I will say that Ilya sometimes gets his chin out there. And I remember when he did fight Jai Herbert, he kind of got hit pretty hard by him, and he was a little bit rattled in that fight. So there is a path for Volk, and if this thing gets off the plus money and it goes to Volk plus money, I might just scrap the whole thing and make money on both sides.
I can't see that happening, but boy, would we be lucky if it did. without question, Topuria is stepping up big time in this fight, but he's got tremendous age advantage here. And how much wear and tear, how much attrition has Volkanovski taken, especially coming off a head kick KO 4 or 5 months earlier? Just think it's awful quick.
I think it's awful quick too. And Lou, what a fantastic breakdown of all these fights. I love having you on. You did a fantastic job as usual. I can't wait for this event. Where could our listeners and viewers get your great information and plays?
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate getting in front of all your listeners. The easiest way to get to me is at gamblou.com, GAMBLOU.com. I offer blogs on an almost daily basis. My podcast is available by accessing the Bout Business podcast each Monday. I do an opening line report podcast that's 6 or 7 minutes long, and all I do is focus in on line movement for that week's UFC card. Now, the last two that we've done last week and this week, there hasn't been a lot of volatility because we have NFL football we're competing with, and we're the little sister in the room that gets shoved off to the side. But in a couple of weeks, when the NFL is gone and all there is basketball, we'll get a tsunami of fight fans start to pay attention, and we'll see more volatility in those lines. So Monday is the Sneak Teep podcast, available wherever podcasts are available. And on Fridays, every week there's a UFC card, gamblou.com, for the Bout Business podcast. And thank you for letting me say that.
Absolutely. Guys, make sure you check out gamblou.com. Fully revamped site. Looks professional. Very well done. Wonderful podcast. Lou, once again, thank you. We'll be texting this weekend.
Thanks so much, Kev, and good luck, everyone.